I remember having the Game Gear and that being
Mm,
so awesome when it came out for me because it was color. I never wanted the Game Boy because I always thought
yeah.
monochromatic was so just
No, that
it
yeah,
didn't
yeah.
interest me. So when the color Game Boy came out, and then like a little bit later the Nomad came out, and I remember one friend had it, and it was just too expensive for us.
Yeah, it was also a battery hog. That
Just like the
that
Game Gear, you had to have I think 6 batteries
yeah,
in it.
the Game Gear took six. The
Hmm.
the Nomad, I think it takes six, but the battery pack's external. It doesn't come with. I don't have the battery pack,
Hmm.
so the Nomad doesn't open up and you put batteries in it. The battery pack is attaches to it, and I've never seen one. I don't know how rare they are, but
Quick little memory. I remember the Game Gear and the battery issue. We used to take
yeah,
these long drives from St. Louis to my family in Chicago, and it would be like a 6, 7 hour drive. And me and my sister
right,
would be in the back seat playing Game Gear and passing it back and forth. But we had the car adapter, so you wouldn't even need to rely on
oh,
the batteries. So it would plug into the
nice,
cigarette lighter.
yeah,
Thing is, when our car hit a bump, it like created a short, so the game
oh,
would just
gee.
flash off, and there was no save or anything. So we would be playing like a Sonic game or something, and try to play as fast as we can before the car would shut the
Right.
game off.
No, no, I get that was that being in color and backlit was a big thing too because you couldn't
Oh
play the
yeah,
Game Boy in the dark.
yeah.
The Game Boy was wise to package Tetris with it because it didn't matter what color it was with Tetris.
Hmm.
So, and if I'm not mistaken, the Game Boy is the most selling Nintendo console ever made.
That's
It was
probably true because everyone
it
had
was
one. There's all
well, and
kinds of versions of it.
it was released. It was released in the late 1980s. I think it was released in like '89, and
That far
it
back.
didn't.
Wow.
The GameCube was out before they discontinued it. They didn't discontinue it until 2003.
Wow.
So yeah, it was out that. So I mean, I have one in box, but it's valuable, but it's not as valuable as you'd think, just because there's so many of them.
Hmm.
You know.
Yeah, since
So
they made so many, and there's a lot of different versions. I remember when they finally came out with like the color version,
yeah.
and they started upgrading it more. But that Game Gear, it came out, it was so ahead of its time, but it didn't really
Oh yeah.
last. It didn't catch on. It caught on with me, but like everyone that I knew still kept with their Game Boy.
I I I think the battery life might have had something to do with it. If I'm not mistaken, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the Super Mario Brothers movie was the first video game movie, not movie
That
about
could
video
be.
games,
That could
but
be.
to be in it. And that the I'm talking about the Bob Hoskins one, right?
Yeah, I haven't
Okay,
watched that one in a long time. It
okay.
gets a bad rap, but I have
It's
fond memories of it. Like I remember watching it
the
as a
yeah.
young kid, so it worked for me.
I was gonna say, as a kid, if you ever get to, there's a fellow on YouTube who I've actually met at a game convention called the Gaming Historian, and he does actually has a whole video about the making of the Super Mario Brothers movie,
I
and it's
probably have
just
seen it because I do subscribe to him and I watch a lot of his content. He's
yeah,
good
yeah.
stuff.
Oh no,
Yeah, it's
I'm a
good
big
stuff.
big fan, and it was just like it's so fun to watch and just to know what was going. Because as a kid, you don't know what's going on behind the scenes,
No, no,
and
it's
it's
more fun that way too. I feel like now we pick apart movies and we know all the details going into the production before it even comes out,
yeah,
and
yeah,
people giving their opinions,
and
and it
and
gets a
and
little
the
muddled.
and the games they try to be more accurate to the game footage as a it's because the Super Mario Brothers movie just kind of made their own world, which but
Yeah, it went way off the wall. I
yeah
remember.
again there were so many hiccups along along that way, but
It's an
but
interesting movie. We should do some sort of like retrospective look at that maybe someday.
no no that
I would love to take a look at that.
I think that would be a great idea. And my sister picks on me sometimes because I used to go out and rent bad movies on VHS on purpose, just because that was my thing. This was
Remember, we used to have to get the Game Genie too. That was
I
a
have
thing.
actually, I have a, oh that there's another the gaming historian does a video about the Game Genie too,
Okay.
and it's interesting. I have a Game Genie myself. Did you know that Nintendo sued them over that?
Uh-uh.
There was a
They didn't
huge
like that.
lawsuit about it. Well, because they said it was their intellectual property, but the
Yeah,
Game
they
Genie
probably got
can't.
a
They
something.
they
There's something to that.
no, no, and they did, and that's the thing. Every time there's a lawsuit, they always try to make it sound like it's awful. I'm like, well, this might be an infringement, but
Hmm.
the Game Genie can't exist on its own. So that
Right.
they
It's
said
dependent
it
on
can't
their
exist
IP.
because
Yeah.
it was never licensed by Nintendo. But there's a
Oh,
Game Genie for the Sega Genesis. I think they called it Game Genie for the Genesis, and Sega did license it. So I think that may have been to like win some of their fan base too,
well, it
because
probably helps with
Sega,
replayability and gets the
honestly,
game.
that's I would have thought that Nintendo would have wanted it because
Hmm.
we dug out the ad even showed, oh, dig out your old games and get out your Nintendo, but
Yeah.
Nintendo was just like, well, no, we didn't make this, we don't want it, out there. But there's actually two. Galoob was the company that licensed it in the States, but there's in Canada it was called Camerica, and if you have the Camerica version of the Game Genie, it's worth a lot more. So.
Wow.
But sometimes I'll be like, "Hey, here's Donkey Kong for 10 minutes," and I like the sound
Yeah.
effects. If you're a gamer, you can hear it in your head, and you're probably picturing him
I tell
running.
you, sometimes you just want to sit and just listen because it brings you
Yeah.
back.
And the reason
About
I do
sitting
that
with
though
your
is,
friends, just playing those games.
oh, absolutely, and all on the same couch.
Games
And
that have really good scores and music and things that are
yeah,
lost to
well,
time unless you go back and play them. It's like
I I
stuff
feel
is
the
really worth
Super.
listening to.
Yeah, well, I feel the Super Nintendo when that came out. That was probably when it started to just become music and not just like video game music. Like for Metroid on the Super Nintendo, I don't know if you've ever played that game.
I didn't play
Um,
that one, but I remember
no.
Final Fantasy would
Oh,
have a lot of good
oh
music
yeah,
too.
that's yeah. The Final Fantasy series is known for and it's like a John Williams score, like when he wrote
It's
the
like
music for
the
Star
John
Wars,
Williams equivalent. Yeah.
right? But actually after I think when Super Mario 3 came out, that was the moment where Nintendo actually developed a dedicated musical department where the only thing that they do is write
Mm.
music and sound effects for video games.
That
For the
music
yeah,
is so good
yeah,
too in
but
those Mario
that's
games.
because, and why it's good is, and I tell this to some people because it's their job,
Yeah.
because that's what they do. The other things I was talking about on my channel was like, this was our internet back in the day, right here.
Oh yeah.
Nintendo Power Magazine. It was like, if you had a subscription to that, like it really felt like you were from another universe for the things you could know from just having that magazine.
Let me admit to
So
something that I used to do. I used to subscribe to Electronic Gaming Monthly
yeah, yeah, me
and
too.
Game Pro, and they used to have like cheat codes and things in there,
Yeah,
and I used to uh, like write them down and then sell them at school. The cheat codes, like who
no,
wants to
that's
beat this game or whatever, and no one else
yeah.
had a subscription. I was kind of like the
I
geeky kid, of course, and
no
no one else
yeah,
had
but
it.
that's like that. What a brilliant idea! Like who
I think I
all
sold like two.
I knew friends. They were guitar players. They'd look at the magazines in the store and they'd have some riffs for them to learn, and they'd like take a Polaroid of it and then just put the magazine back. So it makes me think of something like that, where I mean,
Yeah.
it's not illegal, but it's probably not the nicest
Now
thing that.
now they're gonna start coming
Yeah,
after me that I've admitted to that. Well,
right.
it's been 20 years, guys, so statute of limitations is over. A huge driving factor of purchasing the new systems was this bit wars that you just mentioned.
Yeah,
That was
yeah,
like all we
yeah,
talked about was if you were 8-bit or 16 or 32
yeah,
later. That was like,
yeah, yeah. That's
that was the
and
it
then it
thing.
just because there was a time period where it was more about the graphics than like the actual game,
That's
and it
right.
was just
They
like
would just
I'm like, yeah,
recycle the same game and say it's now 32, but it'd be the
yeah,
same. I remember
yeah.
that was Sonic, like they did something with 32X,
Oh
where
yeah,
they
yeah. I
just,
haven't there.
it was kind of a
It was
gimmick,
just
right?
yeah, yeah. Because they had the Genesis, and then they had the Sega CD, and then they had the 32X, which added on to the Genesis, and they all had their own power sources, and it was just like, and the games weren't better enough to justify just waiting for the next generation
Yeah.
console.
It didn't make
So
the games that much better to look at either. There
no,
wasn't any
no,
noticeable.
it wasn't. I still found the Super Nintendo to be better than. I'm like, no, and
Mhm.
I actually have a couple games on the Sega CD that the graphics are really cool, but that when they were doing that full motion video stuff, and I'm just like,
It's
nah, this.
so pixelated. Doesn't look
Yeah,
too
yeah,
good.
and it didn't age well either. And a lot of it actually was, a lot of it was slow. Like when it would go black to go to the next screen, it would be blank for like
Mm.
a few seconds, and like, wow, I'm like, this is kind of taking a while, you know.
Yeah,
So
the CD format wasn't up to snuff by then, I don't think.
yeah,